So if you have been here over the past few weeks and we have been working our way through the book of Judges, then you already know how this song and dance go. We have a pretty well-established pattern. Israel drifts away from God, trouble comes in, they cry out again to God, God raises up a judge, and then things get better for a while. Rinse and repeat. We've seen it with Othniel and Ehud, we've seen it with Shamgar and with Deborah. But in our reading this morning, something a little bit different happens. This time God breaks the pattern. And instead of sending in a judge right away, God sends in a prophet. And this prophet has got exactly one message. So speaking on God's behalf, this prophet says, "Hey, Israel, listen up. Remember Egypt? I was the one who freed you from Egypt. Remember your slavery? I was the one who freed you. Remember your oppressors? I was the one who took care of them. And all I asked in return was your trust, was your loyalty to me and me alone. But did you listen? No, you did not. You went chasing after other gods." So the diagnosis for their current oppression thus given, in no uncertain terms, God then sends in the remedy as he raises Gideon up as a judge. And the very first thing that God says to Gideon is, "Gideon, go home and tear down the altar to Baal," who was a Canaanite deity. Tear down the altar to Baal that is in your own father's backyard. And Gideon, being brave, but not too brave, he does as he's told, but he does it in the dead of night. He grabs together a few servants and he sneaks out quietly. He smashes that altar to rubble, and he builds a proper altar to the God of Israel in its place. He makes a sacrifice of a bull, and then he heads back home, hoping that no one would notice. But this is a small town we're talking about, so you better believe that people definitely noticed. And when morning comes along, the whole town erupts. Gideon's neighbors, his family, his friends, they are furious. They form a mob. They pick up stones and they demand Gideon's life. So in other words, they are ready to murder their own neighbor for insulting the god Baal in this way. I want to pause here for just a second, because I want us all to feel how absolutely bananas this moment is. Because the people picking up these stones to clobber Gideon over the head with, these are not Midianites. These are not foreigners. These are Israelites. The same Israelites who just days before were crying out to God for rescue. The same Israelites who had just received a prophet who explained exactly why they were being oppressed. You're worshiping other gods, is exactly what the prophet had told them. Yet here they are, standing with stones clenched in their fists, ready to kill one of their own in order to protect one of those very same other gods. So it turns out that they never stopped believing in the God of Israel. They hadn't forgotten their history. They hadn't forgotten their deliverance from Egypt or the miracles of their past. They still believed deeply in that God. They still worshiped that God. They still cried out to the God of Israel. It's just that somewhere along the line, quietly, subtly, without anyone even noticing, they just kind of added Baal into the mix. Baal didn't replace Israel's God. He just stood unobtrusively alongside. Both worshipped, both important, and both fiercely defended. So fiercely, in fact, that the same people who pleaded with God for rescue and who were explicitly warned about their idolatry were ready to kill anyone who threatened these newer, additional gods that they'd come to rely on. And that, my friends, is how idolatry actually works. It's not that you stop coming to church one Sunday and instead stay home to offer your prayers to a golden calf statue that you picked up at Home Goods and for a reasonable price. Far more likely it is that you keep coming to church. In fact, some of the most idolatrous people out there are also at the same time the most traditionally religious people that you could possibly imagine. It's just that in addition to your church-going ways, you also happen to elevate something else up alongside of God. Right? None of us in this room, I don't think, would ever think to bow down to an Asherah pole. I don't think. But tell me this. In your formative years in school, did you hesitate even once to stand with your hand over your heart to pledge allegiance to a flag on a pole? Did you even stop to think about what you were doing when you did that? The Asherah pole was a national symbol too, a sacred object that marked identity, belonging, and divine blessing tied to the land, one nation under Asherah. You didn't choose the flag ritual, but it certainly shaped you. It taught you where your loyalty is supposed to belong. And when the loyalty to your nation begins to outrank your loyalty to God's kingdom, that's not just patriotism, that's worship, right? It's a form of idolatry. I think it's safe to say that none of us in this room would ever throw a child into the fire for Molech, the god of the Ammonites. Most days, I think, at least. But maybe you've sacrificed something sacred on the altar of your career. Maybe your health, your marriage, your time with your kids. Maybe it was your sense of joy. Molech was a deity that demanded everything in exchange for security. And interestingly, so does the god of hustle. When your job asks for all of you, your time, your relationships, and your soul, that's not just ambition, that is a form of worship. That's a type of idolatry. And again, none of us in this room, I think, would ever make an altar to Baal in our backyard, but maybe in your house, in your home, you've erected an altar of family instead. An altar where family first becomes family above all, where protecting your own means ignoring everyone else, where love stops at the front door and refuses even to cross the street. Baal promised security if you stayed loyal, and sometimes too, so does family. But when that loyalty starts to ask for your whole heart, when it crowds out compassion for anyone else, that's not just familial love, that is worship, that is idolatry. That's what I'm trying to get at here is that it's easy for us as modern, sophisticated people to want to write off the ancient Israelites as a backwards and backwater people who never saw a statue that they didn't gladly kneel down before and worship. But much harder it is for us to realize that we are absolutely no different. It's just that our idols are a little bit harder to recognize as such. And for my money, the author and also the fellow upstate New Yorker, David Foster Wallace, he captured this better than perhaps anyone else. And while he described himself as an agnostic and often expressed a deep skepticism towards any form of organized religion, he also had a way of grasping something profound and even a bit haunting about the religious inclinations of the human heart. So here's what he had to say in an address that he gave at Kenyon College all the way back in 2005. The quote is long, but I assure you it is worth the price of admission. So here's what David Foster Wallace has to say. Because here's something else that is weird but true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only thing we get to choose is what we worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it JC or Allah, be it Yahweh or the Wiccan Mother Goddess, or the Four Noble Truths, or some inviolable set of ethical principles, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in this life, then you will never have enough. You will feel you never have enough. If you worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die 1,000,000 deaths before they finally grieve you. Worship power, and you will end up feeling weak and afraid. And you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful, it's that they're unconscious. They are default settings. They're the kind of worship you just gradually slip into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value, without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. End quote. I like to think that that is what Gideon's neighbors discovered, stones in hand, furious at their destruction of the altar to Baal. They didn't just wake up one morning deciding to reject God, the God who had rescued them from Egypt. They simply added another source of faith, another source of identity, another source of security. And eventually, without ever realizing it, they found themselves defending that other God as fiercely and as violently as they ever defended the God that they started with. So what is the takeaway here? Let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you have to watch out for other religions and their sketchy deities. I'm not saying that at all, because idolatry is way sneakier than that. And I think nowhere is that made more painfully clear than in the strange little ending that we see to Gideon's story. So we're told after his miraculous victory over the Midianites, Gideon takes gold from the battlefield and melts it down and makes a sacred ephod. And it needs to be said that no one actually knows what an ephod is. The Bible mentions it exactly twice. Both mentions occur in the book of Judges, but from context we can kind of piece together that it's some sort of statue or image. It's a religious keepsake that Gideon thought would help Israel remember their deliverance, right? A beautiful idea, a God-glorifying decoration for the mantelpiece. What could possibly go wrong with something like that? Well, apparently everything. Because the text tells us that the ephod became a quote-unquote trap for Gideon, for his family, and eventually for all of Israel. The thing intended to honor God soon became just another shiny object that Israel worshipped instead. And that's my point this morning. Idols rarely show up looking villainous. They don't knock on your door and announce that they're trying to replace God. And instead, idols dress up like good things, like noble things, like security, like patriotism, like nostalgia, like good parenting, like wise investing, like just being informed. They sneak into your heart quietly, gradually, and make themselves at home. And before you realize that, that good thing that you welcomed into your life has become your ultimate thing. The thing you would protect at any cost, the thing that you would pick up a stone and die for. And while this isn't a call to paranoia, it is a call to pay attention. To pay attention to what's quietly growing in the soil of your heart, taking up space where love belongs. So this week, I invite you to take inventory, take stock. Find the altar that has been built in your own backyard and take this as the opportunity to tear it down, even if you have to do it at night, even if it makes your neighbors angry. If your phone is where you go to for comfort or escape, that's not a habit, right? That's a god. Delete the app off your phone. If resentment gives you purpose or power, you're not just angry, you are worshiping. So go ahead and forgive that grudge that you have been holding. If being right defines your worth, especially in the area of politics, you have made an idol of your own opinion. Skip the argument. Delete the comment that you're about to make. If money is no longer just a tool for you, but the thing that you trust most in this world, then wealth has become your God. Try giving generously to someone who can't pay you back. And if your pride keeps you distant and protected, that is no longer just a defense, it is an altar. Go ahead and call that person that you've been avoiding. Friends, this is the work of a lifetime. To topple every altar that love didn't build, to clear every seat at your table that love didn't fill, and to watch as the God that we know as love storms back in to reclaim the rightful throne and put everything else back where it belongs. Friends, in Jesus' name, may it be so. Amen.